Welcome back. It's been a little while since I made a video, mostly because I haven't had the time or the subject matter. But today I certainly have the subject matter, so I'm making the time. I'm taking my first look at the new Nikkor Z 180 to 600 millimeter lens for the mirrorless cameras. Up front, let me say that this will be my first video on this lens, and there will be more. So this is going to be my initial review after only a few days to use and test the lens, but I have formed some opinions. I won't read you the spec sheet since that information is so easy to reference, but I'll mention some key numbers that I think are meaningful. The first thing I noticed when I unboxed the lens was the weight, or should I say the lack of weight. The lens weighs just a hair under 4 pounds or 1,955 grams, but it doesn't feel like it. It feels lighter. It has a very balanced feel to it, unlike some lenses that can feel front-heavy. For this review, and likely for future reviews, I used the 180-600 exclusively on the Nikon Z8 camera body. I did this because I believe that this pairing is going to be very common and popular, although the Z9 users are also likely to be interested in it, as well as Z6 II, Z7 II users. With the Z8 weighing in at just 2 pounds or 910 grams, it puts the whole package in your hands at just under 6 pounds. It's easy to carry and handhold all day. I did quite a bit of video with it too, all handheld. Zoom lenses by definition are designed to meet many needs for many different types of photography, but when you have one in this range with a full reach to 600 millimeters, it's pretty clear that nature and wildlife photographers are a key market. Big glass can sometimes mean deciding between that new lens and a new car, or just being out of range altogether. But at a price point of $1,700 US, this zoom is going to fit a lot more budgets. The question is, what do you get for the money? Should you grab this lens, or should you save up for something else? I'll start down the path of trying to answer that. I'm a professional with decades of experience and a very wide variety of lenses and subjects. But I try to base my opinions and my reviews on the item and the product that I'm reviewing and who it's for and how it should be used. For starters, this is not an S-line lens. That means that you can't expect the weather sealing, the durability, and maybe even the sharpness of an S-line lens. That said, it does feel solidly built. It has the same textures and contours as the other Z lenses. The front element filter size is 95 millimeters, so it's not huge, but if you do want a good filter for it, it won't be terribly cheap. The controls on the lens are pretty minimal. There's the manual AF switch for the times you want full manual focusing, and there's also a focus limiter that can be set between full and 6 meters to infinity. The big rubberized ring on the lens is the zoom ring. It has a great feel, it's well placed, and nicely dampened. The best thing about it is the very short throw. You can rotate from 180 millimeters to 600 millimeters and back easily without having to change your grip. I don't want to understate that feature because it's one of the things that I like most about this lens. Another very important feature of the lens is that the zoom is fully internal. The lens does not telescope when you zoom in and out. This means that it should stay in near perfect balance if it's mounted on a tripod or a gimbal and just feel more balanced in the hand. In closer to the camera body is the second of 2 rings, the control ring. By default, it's set to be the focus ring, but it can be programmed for a number of other functions via the camera's menu. I use manual focus frequently, so that's just where I'm going to leave it. But you could have it change aperture or exposure compensation or a long list of other actions. There are 4 function buttons near the front of the lens in top, bottom, left, and right orientation. These can also be programmed to perform one of many actions, but only one designated action can be selected. All 4 buttons act as one or perform the same thing. They're just located for easy access in any hand position. The lens hood is plastic. It's well made and it's a good size for this lens. It has the same latch system as all of the other Z lenses except for the 800 PF. That brings us to the tripod foot and collar. I have mixed feelings about this. For starters, the foot is of course not an Arca Swiss compatible foot. You'll need to bolt on a plate for that, like I've done here. The foot is not removable or replaceable except by removing the entire collar, which does come off. If you intend to shoot all day handheld only, then you may not want the foot in the way. It's a nice option to be able to remove it entirely. But one word of caution, the strap connections are part of the collar, so if you remove it, you'll have no way to attach anything to the lens. The collar does seem very sturdy and it uses a well-made brass screw and knurled knob. I wouldn't recommend using the camera's strap lugs for a lens of this size. There's just too much risk of damage to the connection point for both the lens and the camera. If there are aftermarket foot replacements available in the future, they're likely to be very expensive because you're going to have to replace the entire collar, not just the foot. The lens is capable of accepting both the Z 1.4 and Z 2.0 teleconverters. I did use the 1.4 TC for some shooting. Performance with the teleconverter was decent, much better than I would expect with a similar F-mount setup. But I did notice some minor image degradation, particularly in a loss of sharpness. This shouldn't come as a surprise. And of course you pay the penalty in speed, losing a full stop of aperture. Some of these shots were taken at the far extreme, with the 1.4 TC and in DX mode, with additional cropping in post. It shows what reach is available if you really need it. And in most cases, I think the quality is acceptable. This is, of course, in good light conditions, and even so, these images were treated for noise in post-production, since the ISOs were pretty high. Autofocus with the Z8 through this lens was fast and accurate. I didn't notice any significant changes in AF throughout the focal length range of the zoom. My initial opinion is that the Z 180-600 f5.6 to 6.3 is a bargain at this price. The sharpness is very good, even though it's not S-line level, and all other performance markers are on point. Where it excels is obviously in versatility, but also lightweight and simple function. The short throw zoom ring is fantastic. No matter which Z camera body you connect this to, it's going to give you great range and very good images. Okay, a little bit of image review in no particular order and no particular subject matter, but I went out to one of my sort of go-to places for just lens evaluation, and that is an Air Force Museum, where they have a lot of airplanes out on the tarmac as well as things indoors, so it gives you a lot of opportunities for different stuff. And what I like about it is it's realistic, but there's also a lot of graphical things that you can shoot, and there's a lot of light conditions you can shoot in and all that good stuff. So I went there and I tried to use each major zoom level, like in increments of starting at 180, then going to 300, then 400, then 500, then 600 for each one of the different images. Let me just zoom through a couple of these. So this is at 180 and 300, 400, and I did a pretty good job of hitting the even marks on the lens. I was off a little bit once in a while, but it's pretty easy. Just as an aside, it's pretty easy. If you want to shoot at exactly 400 millimeters, it's pretty easy to dial that in. Looking at the lens barrel, if you go to the middle zero, that's the trick. Go to the middle zero of your numbers on the graduations on the lens, and you're going to be right on. So there's at 500 and then at 600. Nice and sharp in the middle, and I was focused. We're going to have to let this render a second. I was focused right around here. You can see that it's generally pretty sharp. So that's not bad. And again, we're at what, ISO 560. So this is on the Z8. I presume that the Z8 has the similar ISO as the Z9, which has kind of a two base ISOs. One is 64, the other is 500. So that should be a nice clean image. All right, and we go back out, and this is one I wanted to show. So this is, just the tire wheel on one of the airplanes, and this is at 180. But as we go through and zoom in, you can look at the detail is really good, and the sharpness is overall really good. That was one where I missed the mark a little bit. I was 290. This is 400, 500, and then 600. So it gives you an example of the range. Whoops, get back there. It gives you an example of the range you have with this lens. And then the amount of sharpness you have at each of those areas. So, and if we pop into 100% on this, let that render a second. Again, I'm focused here on this central hub, so you can see there's some markings in there, some manufacturing markings. You got some paint run marks and striations in the metal. That's all very sharp, extremely good. So that is the point of focus, and that's important to pay attention to that, because everything else you got to take with a grain of salt, because even at 6.3, the compression is really going to drop your depth of field off quick. So it's important to evaluate it at the point of focus. And one of the things I did want to show is this one, because one of the advantages of this lens, the minimum focusing distance is extremely short for a telephoto's lens, even a long zoom. At 600 millimeters, you are under 8 feet. I think it's somewhere around 7.8 feet minimum focusing distance. So I tried to hit that real close here. So this was, as near as I could scoot back and forth. This was pretty much right at the minimum focusing distance on that wheel. And if we go into 100% on this, look at the detail. Extremely good detail. So for close-up photography, while still maintaining a bit of an arm's length plus, that's a nice option. But this is also a really good indicator here of edge-to-edge sharpness. So you can see here this first S toward the edge, not nearly as sharp. And you can see the sharpness increase as you get into the middle. There we are, really sharp. Now I was not scientifically flat to this surface, but I was pretty flat to this surface as far as my holding of the lens. And of course the wheel is a flat surface based on. And look how much we're losing over here when you get right to the edge. So edge-to-edge sharpness is not super great, but the center sharpness is really nice. So that's a look at the minimum focusing distance at 600 millimeters. So there's your, like, the best shot you're going to get macro wise. And the detail again in the center is extremely good. So depending on what your use is on your subject, you can expect a very good sharpness, even close up with this lens. All right, a couple more I want to show. This one I want to show just because I think it's interesting to see that, okay, first of all, we have some words and letters. So that's something very crisp and precise. And we got a lot of straight lines in this image, but they're not flat. So I was not flat to this sign. You can tell that by looking at it. I'm at an angle, and I did that on purpose because I wanted to see what the fall off would look like. So this is at 180, And this all looks pretty clear and pretty crisp all the way across. And I think I was focused pretty much, I tried to stay focused pretty much on the center where it says ejection seat. And that looks sharp, and it looks very sharp on both edges of that sign. And when you get up way up into here, still holding up really well. And again, we're at 180. So at 180, you're maintaining a nice integrity across the image. You can see the dirt. That's just the dirt on the canopy of the aircraft. And we're falling off worse back here than we are up front. Okay, so there's that one. And then, whoops, wrong way. So I just zoomed in at each level again. So let me go all the way to 600. And you can see, without me even going to 100%, you can see the fall off difference between how it was at 180. And again, this is to be expected. You have a lot more compression the more you zoom in, the longer you go in your telephoto length. So this edge, I think we need to render here a sec. This edge is nice and sharp. You can even see lines in the probably a vinyl sticker that's on there. You can see the lines in that, and maybe it might even be the metal underneath. And then it falls off really quick, and you get over here and you can really see the difference. So that's the difference between a 180 or 200 and a 600, and you're going to see that in pretty much everything. Another one, just nothing specific to shoot at. In fact, nothing but curves and odd lines here. Again, running through the zoom ranges at the major step points. And I like this ball, like a, I'm not sure what it is. I should have done my research and found out, but this ball on the front probably has to do with guidance or something for the aircraft. But it's really cool looking. Whoops. We'll get back to him. So this is at 600 millimeters, and that's really nice and sharp. And of course, this is round. This is a sphere. But look at that. It's just let that render, get those pixels out of there. There we go. Look at that. It's a nice, nice fisheye view of the tarmac, and you can see there's scratched up just from abrasion from flight, I would presume. But if you go down here to the bottom of it and look at the edges, again, this is untouched, so I haven't tried to reduce any kind of noise or clean this up in any way. Okay. And then we'll get to a couple others. Well, I'll show you my buddy here just because I already teased you with that. And that nice light, but you know, if you're interested in shooting animals of any kind, whether it's wildlife or domestic, it's always good to see how it's going to handle that. And that's at 180 millimeters. So that's all the way zoomed out. And I did a couple of these. This one I did also, I'm not going to show you the whole zoom range. You can see that. But this is just to show, and again, this is not filtered or touched in any way, shot with camera neutral, but just to show the saturation and the really great rendering of colors. Really nice job. And this is at 400 millimeters, so this is kind of at the mid-range of the lens, and you can see the fall off in detail. So really nice, and this is shot at f6 because that's the widest you're going to get at 400. All right, so those are some images to review thus far. And I'll have more of this in the future. Well, let me see. Hold on. All right, I'm going to finish up by just scrolling through probably my favorite subject, my buddy, in the backyard, and various zoom ranges on the lens. Always wide open at this point. I haven't stopped it down. That's the advantage of a zoom lens. You know, he's not moving, and I'm not moving. I'm just able to go from, you know, headshot to full body shot. and keep it all full frame. And that's why you want a long telephoto zoom. So it's a thumbs up from me, even with the few noticeable complaints. And again, you have to consider the value of this lens at the price, which I think is outstanding. I plan to bring you more on this lens. I want to do a full video just on using it for wildlife photography. And I have a couple comparisons I want to do. I'd like to compare it to the Z 100-400 with a 1.4 TC, and I'd like to compare it to the F-mount 500 PF prime. If I can find one to use, I'll also compare it to the F-mount 200-500 f5.6 zoom. So be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so that you'll be notified of new content when it's released. I'd also appreciate it if you would smush that like button and help this video to be recommended to others. Let me know in the comments what questions you still have, and I'll do my best to answer them in a future video. Till then, I'm Dave. This is Nights and Weekends, and I'll see you next time.